The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal cathedral, its curved walls reaching high into darkness. Thousands of seats filled the space in perfect circles, each one designed for a different alien species. Some seats held water for the fish-like thalassans. Others glowed with heat for the rock creatures called Valorians. The air itself was carefully mixed to keep everyone alive and comfortable. Ambassador Lee Sung-ho sat in the human section, a small cluster of normal-looking chairs that seemed plain next to the exotic seats around them. He wore a simple black suit and tie, nothing fancy. His face showed no emotion as he listened to the debate raging around him. The topic today was mining rights in the neutral zone, a patch of space between several major star systems. Rich planets full of rare metals waited there, unclaimed and unexplored. Every species wanted a piece of it. Lee Sung-ho had come prepared with detailed proposals. Humans had spent months studying the zone, creating fair mining schedules that would let different species work together without conflict. The plans were smart and practical. They would make everyone money and keep the peace. But no one wanted to hear from the humans. The Terran Federation requests permission to present our proposal, Lee Sung-ho said when the current speaker finished. His voice was calm and professional. A ripple of what sounded like laughter came from the Valorian section. These creatures looked like walking diamonds, their crystal bodies catching and reflecting the chamber's lights. Their leader, a tall being, called Shardsinger Vrex, rose from his heated seat. "The young species wishes to speak again," Vrex said, his voice like breaking glass. "How amusing. Tell us, little humans, what wisdom do your few decades of space travel offer to civilizations that have sailed between stars for millennia?" More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Zephyrians, who looked like giant flying jellyfish, pulsed, with colors that Lee Sung-ho knew meant amusement. The Andromedans, tall and thin with too many arms, made clicking sounds that served as their version of chuckling. Lee Sung-ho stood up slowly. He had heard this kind of talk for months now. Every time humans tried to contribute, the older species treated them like children playing dress-up. They acted like humanity's ideas were cute but worthless. "Our proposal addresses the main concerns raised in today's session," Lee Sung-ho continued, ignoring the mockery. "We have identified 17 potential conflict zones and developed rotation schedules that would maximize resource extraction while minimizing territorial disputes." Territorial disputes? Vrex's crystal form seemed to brighten with amusement. "Child species, your kind has been in space for what? 50 years? We Valorians have been managing territorial disputes since before your son was born. We do not need lessons in civilization from creatures who still fight wars over water and dirt." The chamber erupted in what passed for laughter among dozens of alien species. Screeches, clicks, musical tones, and stranger sounds filled the air. Lee Sung-ho felt heat rise in his chest, but his face remained calm. "Furthermore," Vrex continued, clearly enjoying himself, "your species is driven by primitive emotions. Fear, anger, love, hate. Such feelings make you unpredictable and dangerous. How can beings ruled by chemistry and hormones possibly understand the careful logic required for interstellar cooperation?" The Eternal Hegemony's representative, an ancient creature that looked like a floating brain in a clear case, spoke in its whispering mental voice that everyone could hear. "The Valorian speaks truth. Emotional species lack the clarity for complex decisions. Perhaps humans should observe and learn before attempting to guide their betters." Lee Sung-ho looked around the chamber. He saw species that had been traveling between stars when Earth was still covered in ice. Civilizations that had built wonders beyond human imagination. Creatures with technology that made human science look like cave paintings. But he also saw something else. He saw the Zephyrian trade representative nervously checking data tablets, worried about shipping delays. He saw Andromedan industrial coordinators arguing about supply chain problems. He saw the aquatic thalassans struggling with their translation, devices missing half of what was being said. For 6 months, Lee Sung-ho had watched these great civilizations stumble through basic logistics. They spent weeks debating simple trade agreements. They couldn't coordinate military patrols without creating diplomatic incidents. Their technology was amazing, but they couldn't make it work together efficiently. And for 6 months, humans had been quietly fixing their problems. Human engineers repaired incompatible alien systems. Human diplomats smoothed over cultural misunderstandings. Human logistics experts coordinated supply chains that kept the galaxy's economy running. None of the aliens seemed to notice. They were too busy being superior. The Terran Federation appreciates the Council's guidance, Lee Sung-ho said finally. His voice was perfectly polite, but something in his tone made a few of the closer aliens look at him more carefully. He began gathering his materials from the desk in front of him. Tablets, data chips, printed reports. Everything humans had prepared to help make this session productive. However, he continued, standing and organizing his papers with deliberate slowness, it appears that humanity's contributions are not valued or desired in this forum. The laughter was dying down now. Some species were starting to pay attention. Lee Sung-ho's tone was still respectful, but there was something final about his movements. Therefore, effective immediately, the Terran Federation withdraws from these proceedings. Lee Sung-ho closed his briefcase with a soft click that somehow seemed very loud in the suddenly quiet chamber. All human territories, trade routes, and resources are hereby closed to non-Terran vessels. Human personnel will be withdrawn from all joint operations and shared facilities. This withdrawal is complete and permanent. The silence stretched out, like a held breath. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and other detection organs focused on the small human figure standing calmly in his plain black suit. Vrex recovered first, his crystal form pulsing with what might have been confusion. You cannot be serious. Your species depends entirely on galactic infrastructure. Your colonies need our trade routes. Your technology relies on our manufacturing networks. Lee Sung-ho picked up his briefcase and walked toward the chamber's exit. The Council will receive formal notification within the hour. All human commitments and contracts will be terminated according to their emergency withdrawal clauses. This is madness. The Andromedan trade coordinator was on his feet, his forearms waving frantically. Humans cannot survive in isolation. You will crawl back within weeks begging for our help. Lee Sung-ho paused at the chamber door and turned back one last time. For just a moment his professional mask slipped and something cold and determined showed through. Perhaps, he said quietly. Or perhaps the Council will discover exactly what humanity has been contributing to galactic civilization. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss. For several minutes the chamber remained silent. Then the babble of alien voices rose like a tide. Some species were angry, others seemed confused. A few were already calculating how to divide up human territory and resources. None of them were worried. Humans were too small, too new, too dependent. They would be back soon enough, humbled and grateful for another chance to sit at the adults' table. Across the galaxy, human ships received their orders and began moving. Cargo vessels left alien ports without unloading. Military escorts abandoned their patrol routes. Diplomatic missions packed up and departed overnight. On Trade Station Kepler 7, Captain Park Hyun-woo watched alien merchants arrive to find empty docking bays and powered-down facilities. The aliens seemed confused by the sudden absence of the humans who had been running the station's logistics systems. On the mining world of Centauri Prime, engineer Kang So-min supervised the evacuation of human technical teams. The alien overseers protested, insisting that the mining equipment would stop working without human maintenance. Kang So-min just smiled and wished them luck. In the neutral zone itself, Commander Song Ji-hai recalled her patrol fleet to human space. The aliens had been so focused on fighting over future mining rights that they had never noticed how human ships had been keeping the area safe and stable. On Earth, President Shin Hae-won watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Every human ship, station, and settlement was withdrawing on schedule. The operation had been planned for months, waiting for the right moment. "Are we sure about this?" asked her aide, a young woman named Kim Min-ji, who had been monitoring alien communications. "The economic impact will be severe. Our colonies depend on galactic trade networks." President Shin smiled the same cold smile that Lee Sung-ho had shown in the council chamber. Dr. Kim, how long have our economic analysts been warning about our trade deficit with alien civilizations? About? Never, actually. Our trade balance has been strongly positive for years. And how many critical alien systems currently run on human-designed software? Kim Minji checked her tablet. Approximately 70% of all interstellar navigation systems, 85% of universal translators, and 92% of automated logistics networks. The aliens think they need us for our raw materials and cheap labor, President Shin said, watching ships lift off from Spacepo. 3 weeks had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. Trade Captain Park Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching the last human cargo ships prepare for departure. Beyond the station's protective shields, alien vessels waited in confused clusters, their crews unsure what to do next. The station had been humanity's largest trade hub in this sector, a massive structure that processed millions of tons of cargo every day. Goods from 100 different worlds flowed through its docking bays and storage areas. Now the bay stood empty, and the aliens were starting to panic. Park Hyun-woo checked his tablet one more time. Every human ship was accounted for. Every piece of human equipment had been loaded and secured. In 6 hours, Kepler Station would go dark, its systems locked down, and its staff evacuated. Captain, called his logistics officer, a young man named Lim Soo-jin. The Zephyrian trade fleet is requesting permission to dock. They say they have emergency cargo that needs processing. Park Hyun-woo looked out at the jellyfish-like ships floating beyond the station. Their bioluminescent patterns were flashing in distress colors. What kind of emergency cargo? Food shipments to their colony worlds. Apparently, their usual supply routes have been disrupted. Park Hyun-woo almost smiled. The Zephyrians had always been proud of their efficient trade networks. They bragged about how their ancient civilization had mastered interstellar commerce long before humans had discovered fire. What they never mentioned was that 60% of their food shipments passed through human-controlled space, following routes that human navigators had mapped and human traffic controllers had organized. Send them our regrets, Park Hyun-woo said. Remind them that Kepler Station is now closed to non-human vessels. Sir, they're offering to pay triple the standard docking fees. The answer is still no. Through the station's communication systems, Park Hyun-woo could hear the growing chaos on alien frequencies. Ships were reporting navigation failures. Cargo was piling up at stations that didn't know how to process it. Trade routes that had worked perfectly for decades were suddenly falling apart. On the industrial world of Valoris Prime, the Crystal, beings were discovering that their most advanced mining equipment had stopped working. The machines were still functional, but the control software had been designed by humans. Without human technicians to maintain and update the code, the systems were beginning to fail in ways the Valorians couldn't understand. Shardsinger Vrex, the same being who had mocked humans in the council chamber, stood in his planet's main mining facility watching millions of credits worth of equipment sit silent and useless. His crystal form pulsed with frustration as his engineers tried unsuccessfully to restart the systems. How can this be? He demanded of his chief technician, a being whose crystal structure was clouded with confusion. We built these machines. We understand every component. Yes, Lord Vrex, but the control algorithms were upgraded by the human contractors last year. The new software integrates with 17 different alien technologies in ways that our engineers cannot replicate. Without the human-designed interface protocols, the systems cannot communicate with each other. Vrex's light dimmed as the full implications hit him. The Valorians were master engineers and brilliant inventors, but they had always worked within their own technological framework. Humans had somehow bridged the gap between incompatible alien systems, creating networks that no single species could have built alone. Similar realizations were occurring across the galaxy. On the water world of Thalassa, the aquatic aliens were facing a crisis that threatened their entire civilization. Their water purification systems, essential for maintaining the delicate chemical balance that kept their cities habitable, were beginning to fail. Dr. Kim Min-ji, the xenobiologist who had been studying on Thalassa, watched from the departing human research vessel as emergency lights began flashing in the underwater city below. She had tried to warn the Thalassian authorities, but they had dismissed her concerns as human overreaction. "The purification matrix will hold for another few days," she told Captain Nam Wu Jin as their ship pulled away from the planet. "After that, the pH levels will start shifting. They'll have maybe a week before the water becomes toxic to their nervous systems." Captain Nam looked grim. "Can they fix it themselves?" "Maybe, if they can figure out how the human-designed biofilters work. We've been upgrading their systems for years, integrating Earth-based bacteria with their native organisms. It's incredibly complex work. Their scientists are brilliant, but they specialize in pure research, not practical engineering." The problems weren't limited to individual worlds. The galaxy's entire communication network was beginning to break down. The Universal Translation Protocol, the system that allowed different species to understand each other, had been subtly modified by human linguists over the years. These modifications seemed minor, but they were essential for handling the complexities of real-time interspecies communication. Without human maintenance, the translation systems were beginning to drift. Simple conversations became confused exchanges. Complex negotiations became impossible as subtle meanings were lost or distorted. Trade agreements that had been negotiated in perfect understanding suddenly seemed unclear and contradictory. On the pleasure world of Nexus Prime, a vacation destination popular with wealthy aliens from across the galaxy, the situation was becoming dire. The planet's atmospheric processors, which maintained the perfect climate that made the world so attractive, were failing one by one. Manager Oh Jong-ho had been evacuated with the rest of the human staff 3 days earlier, but he could still monitor the situation through long-range sensors. The atmospheric processors were incredibly sophisticated machines, designed by a dozen different species and integrated through human engineering. Without human technicians to coordinate the different systems, the machines were beginning to work against each other. The Andromedan weather control systems are trying to increase humidity, while the Valorian thermal regulators are trying to decrease it, Oh Jong-ho reported to his evacuation ship's captain. The Zephyrian wind generators are fighting with the Thalassian pressure systems. In about 6 hours, they're going to create a feedback loop that will crash the entire atmospheric grid. Can we warn them? I tried. The Nexus Prime Authority told me that human concerns were no longer relevant to their operations. 6 hours later, Nexus Prime experienced its first major storm in over 2 centuries. Winds that should have been impossible under the planet's controlled conditions tore through luxury resorts and recreational facilities. The artificial paradise that had taken decades to create was falling apart in a matter of hours. But the real crisis was just beginning to unfold in the galactic economic system. Trade Captain Park Hyun-woo's evacuation of Kepler Station was being repeated at human facilities across the galaxy. Cargo ships found themselves stranded as the complex logistics networks that had kept goods flowing between star systems simply stopped working. The Andromedan Collective, which prided itself on its advanced industrial capabilities, discovered that their manufacturing worlds were completely dependent on resource shipments that were coordinated through human-managed trade routes. Without these shipments, their factories began shutting down one by one. Chancellor Yu Dae-sung, watching from his office on Earth, allowed himself a small smile as the reports came in. As humanity's chief economic advisor, he had spent years trying to explain to other species how interconnected the galactic economy had become. None of them had listened. The Andromedan industrial output has dropped by 40% in 3 weeks, his aide reported. The Valorian mining operations are down 60%. Zephyrian food production is approaching critical levels. And the responses? Mixed. Some species are blaming us for sabotage. Others are insisting they don't need human assistance. A few are beginning to ask questions about how their systems actually work. Yu Dae-sung pulled up a 3-dimensional display, showing trade flows across the galaxy. Before humanity's withdrawal, the display had shown a complex web of interconnected routes, with goods and services flowing smoothly between hundreds of star systems. Now the web was full of breaks and gaps, with entire sectors effectively cut off from the galactic economy. The hegemony of Altair has lost contact with 12 of their outer colonies. The aide continued. The colonies are fine, but the communication relays were maintained by human technicians. Without regular maintenance, the quantum entanglement systems are beginning to decohere. This was perhaps the most shocking discovery for the alien civilizations. The hegemony of Altair had always boasted about their advanced communication technology, quantum entanglement systems that allowed instant communication across vast distances. What they had never admitted was that these systems required constant fine-tuning and maintenance that their own scientists couldn't provide. Human engineers had been quietly maintaining these systems for years, making tiny adjustments that kept the quantum field stable and the communications clear. It was delicate work that required an understanding not just of quantum physics, but of how different alien technologies interacted with each other. On the Altarian capital world, technicians stared helplessly at readouts they couldn't int. 2 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, emergency sirens wailed across the crystal spires of Valoris Prime. Shardsinger Vrex stood in his command center, watching displays that showed mining production across his empire dropping to 0. Not reduced, not delayed. 0. The Valorian Empire had built its power on mining rare elements from dead worlds. Their crystal-based technology required specific isotopes that could only be extracted using the most advanced equipment. That equipment now sat silent and dark across dozens of worlds, its human-designed control systems locked in diagnostic loops that no Valorian engineer could break. Lord Vrex, his chief technician reported, his crystal form dim with exhaustion. We have tried everything. The mining systems require authentication codes that change every hour. The algorithms that generate these codes were designed by human cybersecurity specialists. Without the master keys, we cannot operate our own equipment. Vrex's crystal body pulsed with frustrated energy. His people had mined these worlds for 3,000 years before humans had even discovered space travel. Now, after just 2 months without human technical support, the foundation of Valorian civilization was crumbling. The situation was even worse on other worlds. The Andromedan Collective's industrial heartland was experiencing what their economists were calling cascade failure. Factories that had operated for centuries were shutting down as supply chains collapsed and automated systems failed. Director Lee Young-soo had once managed logistics for the Andromedan Central Manufacturing Hub. From his evacuation ship, he watched long-range scans of the facility where he had worked for 5 years. The massive complex that had once produced starships, industrial equipment, and consumer goods for half the galaxy was now a maze of darkened buildings and idle assembly lines. The Andromedans are trying to restart production using their backup systems, reported his assistant, Engineer Kang So-min. They don't understand that the backups are just interfaces. The real control systems were integrated into the galactic logistics network. Without human coordination protocols, the backups can't communicate with suppliers, can't schedule deliveries, can't even process raw materials efficiently. Lee Young-soo nodded grimly. The Andromedans were brilliant inventors and skilled manufacturers, but they had always worked within closed systems designed by their own people. Humans had spent decades creating open networks that allowed incompatible alien technologies to work together. Without those networks, each species was trapped within its own technological limitations. On the water world of Thalassa, the crisis had moved beyond economic disruption to survival. Dr. Kim Min-ji monitored the situation from orbit aboard a human research vessel, watching as the aquatic civilization faced its greatest challenge in recorded history. The ocean cities that housed billions of Thalassans were beginning to fail. Water purification systems designed by a dozen different species were working against each other without human coordination. The carefully maintained chemical balance that kept the water habitable was shifting toward levels that would be toxic to Thalassan physiology. The pH levels in the northern cities have already dropped below safe limits, Dr. Kim reported to Captain Nam Woo-jin. The Thalassans are evacuating their populations to the southern hemisphere, but the purification systems there are beginning to show the same problems. They have maybe 3 weeks before the water chemistry becomes lethal across the entire planet. Captain Nam watched the massive underwater cities through the ship's sensors. Millions of aquatic beings were streaming through the water in desperate migrations, seeking areas where the chemistry remained stable. It was a heartbreaking sight, but his orders were clear. No direct intervention. Have they requested human assistance? No. Their ruling council issued a statement yesterday claiming that the water chemistry problems are the result of human sabotage. They're demanding that we restore their systems immediately or face military action. Captain Nam almost laughed at the irony. The Thalassans were threatening to attack the only species that could save them. Pride and stubbornness seemed to be universal traits among galactic civilizations. The communication breakdown across the galaxy was becoming more serious every day. The Universal Translation Protocol, maintained by human linguists working with alien language specialists, was degrading rapidly. Simple conversations were becoming exercises in frustration as meanings were lost or distorted. On the diplomatic station, Harmony Point, Ambassador Zhang Bo-Ram watched alien delegations struggle to communicate with each other. What had once been smooth negotiations were now confused exchanges where no one could be sure they understood what others were actually saying. The Zephyrian trade representative just agreed to sell his entire fleet to the Valorians for 3 tons of processed steel, reported the station's communication specialist Oh Jung-ho. I don't think that's what he meant to say, but the translation system rendered his offer for temporary cargo space rental as permanent vessel ownership. Transfer. Zhang Bo-Ram shook her head in amazement. The Universal Translation Protocol seemed simple on the surface, but it was actually one of the most complex systems in the galaxy. Human linguists had spent decades working with alien specialists to handle not just direct translation, but cultural, context, implied meanings, and subtle diplomatic language. Without constant human maintenance, the system was reverting to crude word-for-word translations that missed most of what was actually being communicated. The space lanes themselves had become genuinely dangerous. Navigation systems that had guided ships safely for decades were providing increasingly inaccurate readings. Hyperspace jump calculations that had once been routine were now producing errors that stranded ships in deep space or, worse, sent them crashing into stellar objects. Commander Song Ji-hai led the human defense fleet patrolling the edges of Sol system, monitoring distress calls from across the galaxy. Every day brought reports of ships lost, cargo vessels stranded, and passenger transports arriving days late at destinations that should have been hours away. Another Andromedan cargo convoy is requesting emergency navigation assistance, reported her communications officer Captain Lim Soo-jin. They've been trying to reach their colony world for 6 days. Their navigation computer keeps calculating hyperspace jumps that drop them into empty space. Song Ji-hai studied the tactical display, showing the positions of alien ships throughout the local sector. Red markers indicated vessels in distress. Yellow markers showed ships with navigation problems. Green markers, indicating ships operating normally, were becoming increasingly rare. Any change in the official response from their government? No, ma'am. The Andromedan Collective continues to insist that human withdrawal is a temporary tantrum, and that their navigation problems are the result of human interference with galactic communication systems. Song Ji-hai almost admired their determination to blame humans for everything. The navigation problems weren't caused by human interference. They were caused by the absence of human assistance. For decades, human navigators had been providing real-time corrections to alien navigation systems, compensating for gravitational anomalies, solar flare interference, and the 1,000 other variables that made interstellar travel challenging. The aliens had never realized this was happening, because the assistance had been seamlessly integrated into their navigation protocols. They thought their systems were naturally accurate. Without human corrections, they were discovering that space navigation was much more difficult than they had believed. On Earth, the Galactic Council's first emergency session in 3 centuries was being broadcast on every communication channel. President Shin Hae-won watched from her office as alien representatives argued, accused, and demanded in a chamber that was noticeably emptier than usual. Many species couldn't attend because their ships couldn't navigate to the council station reliably. The session had been called to address what the Council was officially calling technical difficulties affecting multiple star systems. Privately, intelligence reports suggested that some alien governments were beginning to understand the true scope of the crisis. The hegemony of Altair has lost contact with 40% of their territory, reported Director Yu Dae-sung, reading from the latest intelligence briefing. Their quantum communication arrays are failing faster than their technicians can repair them. They're requesting emergency technical assistance from any species with relevant expertise. Any responses to their request? None. Every major civilization is dealing with similar problems. The Zephyrians have offered to share their biocommunication technology, but it's incompatible with Altarian quantum systems. The Valorians suggested using their crystal-based networks, but those require specific harmonic frequencies that other species can't generate. President Shin reviewed the reports scattered across her desk. Each alien civilization had amazing technology that worked perfectly within their own systems, but connecting those systems, making them work together, translating between incompatible standards, that had been humanity's specialty. What about the Eternals? Any word from them? Still silent. Our monitoring stations detect no communications from eternal space. No ship movements, no diplomatic activity. It's like they've shut down all external cont. The Galactic Council's emergency delegation arrived at Earth's orbital defense stations exactly 4 months after humanity's withdrawal. Admiral Jang Bo-ram watched their approach from the bridge of the human dreadnought, Indomitable Spirit, noting the careful formation that kept the alien ships well within the boundaries established by human traffic control. The delegation included representatives from every major galactic civilization. The same beings who had laughed at human contributions now came bearing gifts, apologies, and increasingly desperate offers. Their ships looked different than they had 4 months ago. Maintenance schedules disrupted by the loss of human technical support had left even these flagship vessels showing signs of wear and neglect. The Valorian vessel is requesting permission to dock, reported Communications Officer Park Hyun-woo. They're transmitting what appears to be a formal diplomatic apology in 17 different human languages. Admiral Jang almost smiled. 4 months ago, the Valorians had insisted that humans were too primitive to understand diplomatic protocols. Now they were desperately searching human databases to find the proper forms for requesting forgiveness. Grant them docking privileges in Bay 7, she ordered. Standard diplomatic protocols, full security screening, no exceptions. The Indomitable Spirit was more than just a warship. It was a statement. When the human fleet had withdrawn from galactic space, most aliens had assumed they were seeing humanity's most advanced technology. They had been wrong by several generations. The ship that now hosted the alien delegation was a masterpiece of human engineering that made their previous assessments of human capability look like guesswork. Faster engines, more powerful weapons, defensive systems that could shrug off attacks that would cripple most alien vessels. The aliens had been judging human technology based on what humanity had chosen to share, not what humanity had chosen to keep hidden. Shard Singer Vrex led the Valorian delegation through the docking bay, his crystal form dim with what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. The mining lord who had once mocked human emotions now found himself surrounded by technology he couldn't understand, carried in a ship that outclassed anything in the Valorian fleet. Ambassador Vrex, Admiral Jang greeted him formally. Welcome aboard the Indomitable Spirit. I trust your journey was educational. Vrex's crystal structure pulsed with uncomfortable frequencies. The journey to Earth had taken 3 times longer than scheduled. Navigation systems that had once worked perfectly had repeatedly miscalculated hyperspace jumps. Communication with the Valorian homeworld had been sporadic and unclear. Their flagship had required emergency assistance from human patrol ships twice during the voyage. Admiral Jang, Vrex replied carefully, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. The Valorian Empire comes seeking clarification of recent technical difficulties affecting galactic infrastructure. Technical difficulties, Admiral Jang repeated neutrally. Is that what you're calling civilization-ending system failures? The alien delegation was escorted to a conference room, that had been specifically designed to accommodate different species while demonstrating human technological superiority. The environmental controls could maintain dozens of different atmospheric conditions simultaneously. The translation systems worked flawlessly, handling not just language but cultural context and emotional nuance. The display systems could present information in any format that alien senses could perceive. Everything worked perfectly, in sharp contrast to the failing systems the aliens had left behind. The Zephyrian trade representative, a jellyfish-like being whose bioluminescent patterns were flashing in distress colors, was the first to speak. Honored humans, the Zephyrian collective comes bearing gifts of great value: exclusive mining rights to our richest systems, access to our most advanced biotechnologies, partnership agreements that would make your species wealthy beyond measure. Captain Nam Wu Jin, serving as diplomatic liaison, reviewed the offer with professional interest. The mining rights you're offering are to systems that your own industrial reports classify as nearly depleted. The biotechnologies require maintenance, protocols that you can no longer perform without human assistance. The partnership agreements offer us a minority stake in trade networks that are currently operating at 12% of capacity due to navigation and logistics failures. The Zephyrians' patterns dimmed with embarrassment. They had hoped that humans wouldn't have access to current galactic economic data. They were discovering that human intelligence networks were far more extensive than anyone had realized. The Andromedan representative, a tall being with 4 arms and far too many joints, spread his limbs in what his species considered a gesture of submission. The Andromedan collective acknowledges that recent events have revealed dependencies that were not fully understood. We come offering full technology sharing agreements, access to our manufacturing techniques, our industrial databases, our scientific archives. Engineer Kang So-min, who had once worked in Andromedan factories, spoke from her position at the conference table. Your manufacturing techniques require raw materials that flow through trade networks you can no longer operate. Your industrial databases are filled with processes that depend on human integration protocols. Your scientific archives document discoveries that were made possible by human Andromedan research partnerships. The pattern was repeating with each species. The offers they brought were either worthless without human support, or things that humans had already helped create in the first place. The Thalassan representative was next. These aquatic beings had perhaps the most urgent crisis, with their water chemistry reaching lethal levels across multiple worlds. The Thalassan Republic offers full territorial concessions, human colonies in our space, unrestricted access to our ocean worlds, anything you require if you will simply restore the water purification systems that maintain our civilization. Dr. Kim Min-ji leaned forward slightly. The water purification systems that your government claimed were sabotaged by human technical teams? The same systems that your ruling council insisted could be operated without human assistance? The Thalassans' skin patterns shifted to colors indicating deep shame. The ruling council may have been mistaken about the scope of human contributions to our infrastructure. Mistaken, Admiral Zhang repeated. Your people are dying because your government was mistaken. The most surprising offer came from the hegemony of Altair. These beings had always considered themselves the galaxy's master communicators, with quantum entanglement networks that enabled instant communication across vast distances. Now their representative, a tall humanoid with skin that shifted between different metallic colors, was offering something unprecedented. The hegemony proposes full integration, the Altarian announced. Human colonies throughout Altarian space, joint governance of our communication networks, shared authority over our territorial administration. We recognize that human expertise is essential for maintaining the technological infrastructure that supports our civilization. This was more than trade agreements or territorial concessions. The Altarians were offering to share political power, something that had never happened in recorded galactic history. Commander Song Ji-hai studied the alien representative carefully. You're offering to make humans equal partners in governing Altarian space. More than equal, the Altarian admitted. We propose human administrative oversight of all technological systems. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that we did not previously recognize. Admiral Zhang looked around the conference table at the assembled alien representatives. These were the same beings who had dismissed humans as primitive children just 4 months ago. Now they were offering wealth, territory, technology, and political power. These are generous offers, she said finally. Unfortunately, they all address what you want to get from humanity. None of them address what humanity wants from the galactic community. The aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to look confused despite their vastly different biologies. What did humans want? They were offering everything they could think of. Perhaps, suggested the Valorian carefully, you could clarify what terms would be acceptable to the Terran Federation. Admiral Zhang activated the conference room's main display, showing a live feed from Earth. The alien delegates found themselves looking at a bustling spaceport where human ships came and went in perfect coordination. Cargo moved smoothly through automated systems. Passengers traveled safely on schedules that were maintained precisely. Everything worked. What we want, Admiral Zhang said quietly, is very simple. We want respect. The room fell silent. For 6 months, humanity contributed to galactic civilization while being treated as junior partners in our own success. Our engineers were dismissed as primitive while maintaining your most advanced systems. Our diplomats were ignored while preventing conflicts that would have destroyed trade relationships worth trillions of credits. Our scientists were mocked while solving problems that your greatest minds couldn't understand. Admiral Zhang changed the display to show images from across the galaxy. Failed mining operations on Valorian worlds, stranded ships in deep space, underwater cities with toxic water chemistry, atmospheric processors creating. 6 months after the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had humbled themselves before humanity, Director Li Young-Soo stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the morning shift change in Earth's orbital space. The view that greeted him would have been unimaginable a year ago. Alien vessels moved through carefully organized traffic patterns, following routes designed by human controllers and maintained by human systems. Valorian crystal ships waited patiently in designated areas for permission to dock. Andromedan industrial vessels followed precise schedules coordinated by human logistics specialists. Thalasan bioships moved through specially prepared water-filled transit tubes that connected to human-designed life support systems. Every alien ship in Earth space operated under human authority. Every trade agreement required human approval. Every diplomatic mission waited for human scheduling. The species that had once dismissed humans as children now sought human guidance for the most basic activities. The transformation had not happened overnight. After the alien delegations returned from Earth, 3 months of desperate negotiations had followed. Some species had tried to maintain their pride even as their civilizations crumbled. Others had attempted to reverse engineer human technology from the fragments left behind after the withdrawal. A few had even threatened military action against human space. All of these efforts had failed spectacularly. The threats of military action had been particularly amusing. When the hegemony of Altair had sent a battle fleet to demand human compliance, Commander Song Ji-hai had met them at the edge of Sol System with a single human destroyer. The alien fleet of 40 warships had been politely but firmly escorted away by the one human vessel, which had demonstrated defensive capabilities that made their weapons completely ineffective. The attempt to reverse engineer human technology had been even more educational. Brilliant alien scientists had spent months studying human-built systems, only to discover that the technology was far more advanced and sophisticated than they had imagined. What they had dismissed as simple human engineering was actually elegantly complex design that integrated multiple scientific disciplines in ways their specialized minds couldn't replicate. President Shin Hae-won had watched these efforts with patient amusement from her office in Seoul. The new presidential complex included a dedicated alien affairs wing, where representatives from dozens of species waited daily for audiences, trade approvals, and technical assistance. The same beings who had once barely acknowledged human existence now competed for human attention. "The morning briefing is ready, Madam President," announced her aide, Captain Nam Woo-jin, who had been promoted to chief. of galactic affairs. The Valorian Empire has submitted their weekly mining reports for approval. The Andromedan Collective is requesting permission to expand production in 3 star systems. The Thalassan Republic wants to discuss emergency water treatment assistance for their outer colonies. President Shin reviewed the reports with the practiced efficiency that had made human administration so effective. Each request was evaluated not just for its immediate impact, but for its effects on the broader galactic economy, interspecies relations, and long-term stability. Approve the Valorian mining reports with the usual environmental monitoring requirements, she decided. Grant the Andromedan production expansion, but remind them that human safety inspectors will need full access to all facilities. As for the Thalassans, schedule a technical consultation with Dr. Kim Minji's team. Their water chemistry problems are getting worse because they're still trying to operate purification systems without understanding the underlying biology. This was the new reality of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council had been dissolved and replaced with the Terran-led Galactic Assembly, where decisions were made through human-designed efficiency protocols rather than endless alien debates. Problems were solved instead of discussed. Infrastructure was maintained instead of neglected. Conflicts were prevented instead of managed. The old system of governance had been based on the assumption that age and technological specialization automatically conferred wisdom and authority. The new system was based on demonstrable competence and practical results. Humanity had proven that they could make galactic civilization work better than anyone else, so they were given the authority to do exactly that. Dr. Kim Minji had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies biological systems, a field that hadn't even existed before humans started solving problems that alien specialists couldn't handle. Her laboratory in New Geneva Station hosted researchers from every major species, all studying human approaches to complex biological integration. The Thalassan students are making good progress, she reported during the daily science briefing. They're beginning to understand how their native organisms interact with the Earth-based bacteria we use in the purification systems. It will take them years to master the techniques, but at least they're learning. And the Valorian engineers? Still struggling with the software integration concepts. Their minds are brilliant for crystalline chemistry and solid-state physics, but they have trouble with dynamic systems that change in real time. They keep trying to create fixed solutions for problems that require adaptive responses. This was perhaps the most important change in galactic civilization. Instead of dismissing alien limitations, humans were working to understand and accommodate them. Every species had strengths and weaknesses. The key was organizing society to maximize strengths while compensating for weaknesses. Professor Oh Jong-ho had established the galaxy's first Institute for Interspecies Cooperation at Seoul University. His students included some of the brightest minds from across known space, all studying human methods for bridging differences between incompatible systems and cultures. The Andromedan students are particularly interesting, he explained to a gathering of human educators. Their four-armed anatomy gives them natural advantages in multitasking, but their social development emphasizes individual achievement over group cooperation. We're teaching them collaborative techniques that use their physical advantages while developing emotional intelligence skills they've never needed before. The military transformation had been just as dramatic. Captain Lim Soo-jin commanded the new Galactic Defense Fleet, an integrated force where human strategic thinking coordinated alien capabilities in ways that made the combined fleet far more powerful than the sum of its parts. The Valorians provide excellent defensive shields, she explained to the fleet coordination staff. The Andromedans have superior firepower. The Zephyrians offer unmatched speed and maneuverability. The Thalassans contribute biological systems that can adapt to any environment. Each species excels in their specialty, but they never learn to work together effectively. Human military doctrine emphasized combined arms tactics, flexible strategies, and adaptive responses to unexpected situations. Alien military thinking had been based on overwhelming force in their areas of specialization. The integrated approach proved devastatingly effective when tested against the pirate fleets and rogue governments that had emerged during the chaos following humanity's withdrawal. The economic transformation was perhaps the most visible change. Trade flowed through human-controlled hubs that operated with efficiency levels that amazed alien merchants. Supply chains that had been chaotic and unreliable were now smooth and predictable. Resource allocation was optimized through human economic models that considered long-term sustainability rather than short-term profit. Chancellor Yu Dai-sung had been appointed as the galaxy's chief economic coordinator, overseeing trade policies that affected hundreds of star systems and trillions of beings. His office in New Geneva Station processed more economic data in a day than the old Galactic Council had handled in a year. Galactic trade volume has recovered to pre-crisis levels, he reported during the monthly economic review. Agricultural production is up 15% due to more efficient distribution systems. Industrial output has increased 22% through better coordination between manufacturing centers. Unemployment across all species is at historic lows. The aliens were discovering that human economic planning actually made them more prosperous than their own traditional methods. Human systems focused on creating value and solving problems, rather than simply extracting resources and maintaining territorial control. But the most profound change was in how species related to each other. The old galactic civilization had been built on hierarchies based on age, technological achievement, and military power. Species looked down on those they considered inferior and sought to emulate those they considered superior. The new system emphasized cooperation and mutual benefit. Every species had something valuable to contribute. The challenge was organizing society to make the most of those contributions while compensating for individual weaknesses. Ambassador Lee Sung-ho, now Secretary General of the Galactic Assembly, presided over sessions where alien representatives worked together to solve problems rather than arguing about status and precedence. The same Valorian who had once mocked human emotions now collaborated with human mediators to resolve disputes before they became conflicts. The key insight, Lee Sung-ho explained to a gathering of diplomatic